The biggest pushback that I get is I can't do everything for everyone. And I say, I agree with you. That's 100% true. But we can also do a little bit better than what we have been doing, which sort of one size fits all. I'm going to do what's going to work for most. I'm going to do what works for me. And I'm going to do what's most efficient. It's just that we don't even ask the questions in order to entertain what better could look like.
Hello. Welcome to another Knowledge Bomb episode of Lead to Greatness, where we believe in helping others reach their greatest potential and together change the world. Today on Lead to Greatness, we have Beth Ridley. If this is your first time joining us, please consider subscribing and hit that notification bell and hit that like button. This will be greatly appreciated in helping getting out this content to great leaders and great individuals like yourself. Beth is a corporate executive turned organizational transformation consultant, speaker, author, and CEO of Ridley Consulting Group. Beth combines 25 years of leadership and management consulting experiences to help companies simplify what it takes to embed diversity, equality, and inclusion best practices throughout organizations. Beth and her team provide a clear roadmap to improve the ability to recruit and retain top talent, enhance your brand, and increase profitability. Please help me welcome Beth with diversity, equality, and inclusion. This is Cedric Francis, and you're listening to Lead to Greatness.
I'm Beth Ridley. I'm based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I am founder and CEO of consulting firm Ridley Consulting Group. And we do everything workplace culture and leadership, helping leaders create a thriving workplace culture for their employees to attract and retain the best talent, with a heavy emphasis on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And I left a long career in corporate America to start this consulting firm about 5 years ago. Break my career up into like two parts. So the first 12 years or so, I worked overseas, mostly because I was just very interested in living abroad and experiencing different cultures. So I worked in different companies, very different industries. But I worked in London, Japan, Johannesburg, Bangkok for about 2 years each in each of those countries.
Wow.
And then when I came back to the United States, I worked as a management consultant for a large management consulting firm in New York City. For the balance of my career, I worked in financial services for a large financial service organization and a lot of different leadership roles. So held leadership roles in sales and marketing and client experience and technology. So a little bit of operations, a little bit of everything, diversity and inclusion.
Wow.
So I would like to say a really broad appreciation for what it means to be a leader in a corporate environment. I like to say DEI has always been around, right? A lot of times my clients feel like, oh, okay, this is like new. And now it's like the business topic du jour. But, I've personally been working in corporate America for 30 years, and it was definitely around when I entered corporate America. It just wasn't as mature, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the focus was on, we've got people who are different, diversity, but you know what? Stick with talking about the weather and the sports. Don't say anything because we don't want to get in trouble. And then it's evolved all the way to now where there's a big focus on belonging. Companies are recruiting talent from all over. Most companies who, I work with, they don't have all of their open positions filled. Their traditional sources of talent aren't, that reliable pipeline anymore. So, they're looking for talent in new and different places, which means they're bringing in people who you can't think about onboarding, the same talent the same way. Specific example, like I said, I worked a lot in financial services. Typically a financial advisor or a sales rep might have come from right out of college. That pipeline is drying up. College students are doing a whole lot of other things. But school teachers is a profession where, frankly, school teachers, God bless them, they're burnt out and they're looking for new careers. So how you recruit, onboard, prepare, train a school teacher is very different from someone right out of college. So being able to appreciate those differences, help both your fresh college recruit and your school teacher feel that sense of belonging right away so that they're engaged or getting the best out of them, requires looking at and appreciating diversity in many different forms, diverse life experience, professional background, making sure everyone feels that sense of inclusion. Equity just means you're being flexible in your approach. It's no longer one size fits all. So, I like to think of DEI as just tools in your leadership toolkit that can be deployed in so many different ways, because the diversity that is emerging in the workplace is it's always evolving. So I just gave you an example from a client, a market, in terms of diversity around who they're recruiting from non-traditional sources. And most expensive, most valuable asset at work are your human capital. So how are you getting the most out of them? By making sure that they feel welcomed and it's a great place to work due to the culture.
Yeah. Maybe you can touch on some different types of employees.
Yeah.
And how do you work around to get the most out of them without one being neglected and someone being over-treated?
Absolutely. And this is why the ability to do that really distinguishes good leaders from great leaders, or good company cultures from great company cultures. But it does take just being intentional. And you're right. Everybody is coming in with their own unique needs. So it's almost impossible to meet everyone's needs without, with limited resources and time and everything like that. However, I would say it's really about creating an environment where people feel confident and comfortable speaking up to articulate what they need and be part of that solution. No leader is a mind reader. It's unfair to expect leaders to know exactly what to do unless people are articulating what they need. So first and foremost is, leaders should just create that environment where people feel confident speaking up and sharing what would help them to be successful, so that leaders know how to respond appropriately. And the way that leaders can do that, it's really just in their day-to-day. And it's things like actually being curious, asking people, what they're experiencing, what they need to be successful, listening to the answer, being self-aware enough to know maybe what you think isn't the same for other people. What you experience, what you need isn't going to be the same for other people. So not leading with your own assumptions, your own biases. So it's really those little things. It's really more of a mindset. And it's not coming up with the answer. It's not solving for every issue, but it's creating the environment where first, people are even willing to express what they might need. Second, are you willing to invite people in to be part of the solution? And third, are you willing to experiment and try new things? I think the biggest pushback that I get is, I can't do everything for everyone. And I say, I agree with you. That's 100% true. But we can also do a little bit better than what we have been doing, which typically is sort of one size fits all. I'm going to do what's going to work for most. I'm going to do what works for me. And I'm going to do what's most efficient. But a lot of times the most impactful solutions, they're not actually difficult or a heavy lift or a lot of time or a lot of resources. It's just that we don't even ask the questions in order to entertain what better could look like. And so I think that's really how you do it. You just create the environment for everyone else to help you create the culture that's going to be amazing for them, because it's sort of an all hands on deck thing when it comes to workplace culture.
And that's so amazing, because you said ask, listen, and you also talked about self-awareness. And when I was growing up, when I seen corporate, I seen you get a good job and you just stay there till you retire. And that was kind of the mindset. And now we're dealing with a generational society that don't even think like that, because they see the companies different than the companies what I seen when I was young. They see a company that sees nothing but numbers. So it's like, how am I going to be loyal to you and you wasn't loyal to my dad? So they have a different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is you sort of block out other people's perspectives and experiences at your own peril. Because the
That's
one thing
good.
that we know is that change is inevitable and evolution is inevitable. And that's why I say, don't worry about the right time to jump into DEI in terms of your own learning, your own developing these very simple competencies, because it's always an evolving conversation. So it's always the right time to jump in and be part of the conversation versus having to react to when the conversation happens without you being involved, right? Because diversity is happening around us, whether we don't want it to or not, whether we block it out or not. And the truth of the matter is, clearly, they're hiring people in the example that you gave who are of a younger generation because they have no choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's expensive to hire. And it's more expensive when that talent that you work so hard to get leaves. And so you sort of like ignore and pretend that people aren't different at your own peril. And you're absolutely right. And the funny thing is, these Gen Zers, and I've got 3 of them as children of my own, and I see how they are. They're more entrepreneurial by nature because I think they can be. So I think they invest in themselves, and sometimes they'll work for a company and other times they'll drive Uber until the next opportunity. And that's very comfortable for them. I think that companies, at least my clients, they tend to make their biggest gains in terms of really embracing diverse perspectives and ideas when the summer interns come. Because the summer interns are looking around and be like, well, I need this, and how are you investing in my mental well-being? And, why can't I use pronouns? And all these things where companies are like, but they're like, and by the way, if you want me to come back, they're very bold. And that's just sort of how they are. Companies are learning how to adapt with that, because who are you going to hire? Like, who are you going to hire? That's the talent that's out there for these entry-level jobs.
And they're very talented. They're super talented.
They're super talented, and it's so funny because I'm Gen X. And so we used to complain about millennials, like, and they're so, sensitive, and wants an award. And now the millennials, who are a lot of my clients, are in leadership positions complaining about Gen Z. I'm like, you're getting old when you start complaining about
right.
But, for better or for worse, Gen Z, they speak up, they advocate for themselves. And the funny thing is, they think about diversity differently. They don't think, there's some diverse people and they're not diverse people, and diversity means boxes, in terms of gender, ethnicity. They are diverse. They consider themselves to be diverse. They are diverse. They don't even talk about diversity so much as they talk about what I need. You know what I mean? And they just sort of know that they're the embodiment of diversity. And they don't think in terms of descriptors or categories the same way that we do. It is how it is.
And that's really interesting, because I'm also a Gen X, and I remember millennials. I was one of the ones. I raised my hand right now. I was one of the ones talking about how self-centered and how I was. That was me. But then I began to step back, and I'm like, wow. I realized how sharp they were, and it changed for me. It's like, man, I can learn a lot from the millennials, because if I wouldn't have learned from them, I'd be honest with you, Beth, I wouldn't be where I am right now. I would be stuck, because they wouldn't even want to deal with me if I would have kept that closed, fixed mindset. But I shifted with the millennials, and now with the Gen Zs, a part of me wanted to start all over again. But then it's like, I learned from that generation under me, and I said, you know what? I don't want to make the same mistake I made with the millennials. And stepping back now, all the technology, the way the world is now, it's because of millennials. It's like, come on now, we got to wake up.
And the millennials, they were asking, you got Gen Zers, like you said, we're just happy to have a job. And so millennials would start asking for stuff like, time off. And we'd be like, yeah, you ask for that, because I benefit from it. I was just too afraid to ask. But we got a lot from millennials. For example, paternity leave didn't exist.
You're
didn't
right.
exist when
Oh
I
my
was,
goodness.
having
Yeah.
children. But you finally had these millennial dads who were saying, yeah, but I want to stay home too.
Yeah.
The sort of the equal roles of raising a family are
Yeah.
equal now.
Mm,
And it's not like, again, that's traditionally woman's role or a man's role. They're like,
absolutely.
we both work,
Yeah.
and it's so paternity. I thank them for paternity leave. I think that was the first generation to really start talking about wellness, to really
Mm,
start talking about burnout.
right.
I didn't have a word for burnout. It was Tuesday. I'm a little stressed out. Well, it's
Yeah.
Tuesday. Yeah, I think each generation, that's why I said it's DEI is just an evolving conversation.
Yeah.
It's evolving. And now we're taking it to equity, I think was never on the scene 5 years ago. Now justice and, belonging, all these things. It's just a maturity, a collective maturity. And none of it is I don't think anyone is suffering because we have been investing in this. I can't think of a single example.
Yeah.
Frankly, even older white men, I think that they would be hard pressed to say, I am suffering
Yeah.
because,
Yeah.
diversity and equity inclusion is being become more embedded in the culture.
Yeah.
Maybe they can.
Absolutely.
I don't know. I don't hear it,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
I want to shift here because we're talking about this, and I think this is really good because you got the Gen Zs, you got the millennials, and you still have, I mean, baby boomers. With that being said, what are some steps that an organization can take to attract and retain this diversity talent?
Well, I think the most important thing is for whoever is in a leadership, especially in a hiring role. So whether
Mhm.
that be your HR professionals, your hiring managers, it is not enough for a company to simply have a DEI statement. No one is looking at that. No one cares. That's just considered table stakes. It
Yeah.
would be weird if you didn't, I would say
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
And we do know that 80% of job seekers care about a diverse and inclusive, thriving workplace culture. And that's
Absolutely.
80% of everyone. So I think to really bring it to life, your leaders, whoever's interacting on a personal level with your talent, needs to be able to speak to why diversity, equity, inclusion matters to them personally and what that looks like specifically in your organization. And to be able to talk about it with some confidence, with some conviction, with some authenticity. I think that's really the most important thing,
Yeah.
especially if you're looking to bring on talent who does reflect diversity that you don't have in your organization. It is okay if you don't look diverse on the outside, but you're trying to hire people who look more diverse than what you have. It's okay, because it really comes down to, are you able to articulate what it's like to work there with genuine examples and a genuine, like I said, confidence and commitment around a culture of belonging. That's how you're going to get your first couple of hires who may, increase the diversity in your organization. And that eventually will create sort of the flywheel. If they come into the organization and what you say matches their experience,
Mm,
that's going to be most important to people. And then people will be enthusiastic ambassadors to tap into their personal and professional networks, which may be more diverse. And that's really how the sort of the secret engine behind inclusive recruiting. So I think that's the most important thing, is just getting leaders to actually be able to say, this is why investment in this matters to me. And I don't care
mm,
who you look like, if you are representing the company, you must have thought about it. You
mm,
must have thought about it, and you must be able to speak to it. I'm a Black woman. My network is a lot of Black women.
yeah.
And I have a lot of Black female friends who have said, I never thought about working at this company because on the surface, it doesn't look like a place where I would want to work.
Oh,
But during the recruiting process, during the interview process, they were able to speak to me in a way that I believed them, that they were committed to diversity, equity, inclusion. And even if I were to step into that organization and be the first one, it would be a good experience. And it has been a good experience. And now they're bragging about the company to their family and friends and their personal network, and sort of bringing sort of more people along with them. I'll give you a very specific example.
Okay.
So a friend of mine was being recruited for an organization, and and again, it didn't look very diverse. They're committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and they knew that representation did matter, and so they were working really hard to bring on some diverse talent. And so my friend said the one thing that put her over the edge is the CEO of the company met with her, and he's an older white man, and so you would think immediately like, sort of dead in the water, like there's zero connection there.
No.
But his why for why he believed in diversity, equity, inclusion, he told a very personal story, and it was quite simple. When he was little, his dad had a job that required them to move a lot. He knew what it was like to have to always try to work hard to fit in when he started a new school and had to make new friends, how intimidating that felt, how hard it was. And he said he didn't want anyone in his company to ever feel like the new kid at school.
Wow.
He wanted people to feel immediately like they made the right choice. And, they felt welcome to be there. And that's all it took. He had an emotional connection to this work. He wasn't someone who said, well, sure, read our website and you can learn about DEI. Or, oh, we're going to, make sure that you meet with the one other Black employee that we have. We all benefit from DEI. As a leader, a culture of inclusion and belonging is important to me, and I'm telling you why. And that's all it took. That is all it took. It didn't require any money. It wasn't a big, huge initiative. It was leaders just believing in this as humans and being able to articulate it. And, there are going to be some leaders who can never do that because they really don't believe in it. But I think any leader who does believe in it can tap into and be able to articulate their reason why. There's no right or wrong reason. It's just, can you explain it to someone?
Bomb. That is a knowledge bomb. That you just kicked some knowledge
enough
with
seasoning
us.
for you?
That was great. That was great. That was fantastic. And you talked about the CEO, and he didn't have to write the statement. He didn't have to put the statement on the board. He was the statement. And I'm like,
this is the statement.
What's the statement?
And all he had to do was actually reflect.
Yeah.
Reflect and just to show. I mean, you can always tell when someone has thought about something before they answer and when they haven't. He didn't say, just a minute, let me get HR in here for you. He was excited to answer the question because he had thought about it. And I love what you said. He didn't need a statement because he was DEI. And that's, I think, what a lot of, older white men, cisgender Christian, who definitely think I'm not diverse. At a minimum, at best, they feel like I'm not diverse. I don't have a leg to stand on. At worst, they think this is everything against them and they're the problem. It's not that at all. It's, everyone wants to feel that sense of belonging. And I'm sure if you reflect long enough, everyone can tap into when they didn't. And don't you want your most valuable resource at work, your human capital, to feel that sense of belonging more often than not? And I think that's just it. Like, everyone benefits from investing in belonging. Therefore, everyone actually should play a role in it.
That's another knowledge. And you're so right. You're absolutely correct. We just want to feel like we belong to something. So I want to talk about consulting group, the story behind the journey and your focus and why.
Oh, I appreciate that. So Ridley Consulting Group, it's my last name, Ridley, Beth Ridley. I started it. Like I said, most of my career is in corporate. I had a lot of different leadership roles. And the one thing that I noticed is that sometimes like people who are really good at bringing out the best in people, like true people leaders, often get overlooked. Being a good people leader is considered more of a soft skill. It's a nice to do, but it's not critical to do. A lot of times leaders get into leadership because they have strong technical skills, they're good subject matter experts, or they've just been in their role long enough and they sort of move up the ranks that way. But I saw a lot of really great people leaders who often get overlooked, overshadowed, and not celebrated and recognized. And so therefore, the other leaders around them sort of rise to the lowest common denominator of leadership, which is, just get your work done and don't care how people feel along the way.
Yeah.
So when I decided to leave corporate, I definitely wanted to do something that elevated, that celebrated these phenomenal people leaders, because I had worked in consulting at one point in my career. I definitely knew how to consult, and I decided that I was going to help companies transform their culture through leadership and really work with those senior most leadership teams. A lot of times senior leaders, they're kind of miserable in their roles in their leadership team as well. And if we can fix the leadership team and show you how, with some simple diversity, equity, inclusion, competencies, and behaviors, it improves your own experience. And then you can see how it can improve the experience of everyone else in the organization. So sort of changing the culture by starting at the top. And so that's really, what my consulting practice is set up to do. I work with small to mid-sized companies from, I would say, 50 to 500 employees is my sweet spot, where small efforts working with the leaders can have pretty significant ripple effect right away. So those are the type of leaders who I like to work with. I've recently started what I call the Inclusive Leaders Roundtable. So it's one senior leader from each of the companies I work with, or just a senior leader who's very interested in terms of how to lead by example to affect culture change in their organization. And so we meet once a month for 90 minutes, and we just talk about what's working, what's not working, supporting one another, and being part of a supportive community, because the work of leading by example, it can be hard. And so leaders need to know they're not alone. It's worth the effort, and to keep it going. And that's how you create sustainable change.
Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. What are some practical leadership growth tips, tools, advice that you could share with the Lead to Greatness community to help us reach our greatest potential?
I think the most important thing is, again, to me, a lot of this work is about mindset. And I always like to tell, a lot of times people are like, I'm an inclusive leader, I'm polite and nice to everybody. And I would say, well, don't quite use that as your measure. Really think about the difference between tolerance and the true sense of belonging, right? And so how often do we just feel tolerated at work? Which is, people know we exist, they appreciate how we're different, but it's kind of like, yeah, you do you, but this is how it's going to be. And so, I really want leaders to think about, how can you show up and be better than just helping people around you feel tolerated? How can you help people around you feel that true sense of belonging? And it really comes down to the small things that you do in your daily interaction. And again, I think the 3 simple things to think about to really be a leader who helps people not feel just tolerated, but that true sense of belonging when they're in your presence, whether it's a big meeting or through one-on-one, is, are you asking people what they think? Are you listening to their answer? And are you seeking to understand, even when it's contrary to your opinion, your beliefs, even when you hear something that you don't like, you wish you'd never asked, and you don't agree with? Are you at least trying to understand? And I think if you can try to do those three things in every single interaction, ask others, listen, and seek to understand, you are moving in the right direction to be that leader who moves beyond just tolerance to true sense of belonging. And again, those 3 things is the distinguishing factor between a good leader and a great leader.
Oh, wow. That is a knowledge bomb. And that definitely leads into the fact of, how can you lead someone you don't understand? It's impossible to lead someone you don't understand. So thank you, Beth, for this amazing information, this amazing episode on today. If someone wanted to connect with you and what you're doing, where should they go?
I want to send them to ridleyresources.com. My last name, RIDLEY, resources.com, because there you can download free resources to help you with just the things that we talked about. Really simple things. I call them everyday acts of inclusion. Really simple things that you can do in your day-to-day, just to be a more inclusive leader that brings out the best in everyone. So you don't need more time. You don't need to do anything differently. You just do what you're doing anyway with some of these concepts that we talked about in the front of your mind as opposed to the back of your mind.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
On
behalf of the Lead to Greatness community, we want to thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedule and adding value to us all.
Thank you. It was such a fun conversation. I appreciate you having me.
We want to thank you for joining us today on the Lead to Greatness podcast. And if you're on iTunes, go ahead and rate the podcast and leave a review. That helps get the word out to great leaders and entrepreneurs like yourself. So we want to thank you for joining us today. So remember, if you help others reach their greatest potential, together we can change the world. Peace.